Welcome to your favorite bookish podcast, Fully Booked and Caffeinated. I'm Heather.
And I'm Kelsey.
And today's episode is about the pretty much epic love story of grief, loss, second chances. Mental health is really thrown into this one a lot. Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan. So before we dive into this deep, deep book, what are you drinking?
I actually have some wine tonight.
Ooh.
I'm drinking Beachcomber Blush from Larita. Because I was there this past weekend and I was driving, so I couldn't finish my whole bottle of wine. So I had to bring some home. But it's a perfect rosé because it's getting warm outside. It reminds me of summer day drinking. I'm living.
Yep, I was driving home from work with my sunroof open and the sun beating on me, and I was like, I am so ready to be outside drinking with my gals.
Absolutely. We're getting little hints of it. Pretty soon it's going to be
full blown.
It's going to be time.
Yep. 100%.
So what are you drinking, Heather?
I actually found this was like brand new at ShopRite. Coffee Mate now makes like their own iced coffee, like pre-made.
I saw this.
So I bought it because I was like, let me give it a shot. I got the French vanilla one. It's not bad. So I have that, and I put some of the French vanilla cold foam that I had on top of it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Is it like too sweet or milky, or is it more like coffee? I feel like sometimes they're like flavored milk.
I would probably go more with flavored milk. It has like the coffee taste, but it's not obviously as strong as a normal coffee that you would make.
Yeah. Okay.
But it hits the spot when you want something. Yeah, I want something cold. So it's not terrible. So, cheers.
Cheers.
So Kennedy Ryan is a New York Times and USA Today best-selling author who writes for women from all walks of life, empowering them and placing them firmly at the center of each story and in charge of their own destinies. Yeah, she does. That is definitely a thing that she does. Her writings have been featured in NPR, Entertainment Weekly, USA Today, Glamour, Cosmo, Ebony, Time, and many, many others. One thing that I was reading about on her website bio is that she's actually a co-founder of Lift for Autism, which is an annual charitable book auction. So she has like this really big passion for raising autism awareness, which that's
awesome.
Great. That's so great. So I thought that was actually, I never would have guessed anything like that. So that was a really cool fact to learn about her. And another cute thing was that she was dubbed Queen of Hugs by her readers. So I'm guessing like when she does like book cons and everything, conventions, she probably like meets her fans, and I'm assuming she gives like the best hugs.
Yeah. Oh, I feel like I could use a hug from her.
Right? Especially after what she did to me with this book. So a hug is needed.
Yeah. I deserve this hug, damn it.
Exactly. And then on Goodreads, she has this quote, which again is literally what she does. She says, "I always give my characters their happily ever after, but I love to make them work for it. It's a long road to love, so sit back and enjoy the ride."
That tracks. Enjoy the ride. I don't know, but that tracks.
Definitely. And then I saw there's actually talk of an adaptation being in development at Peacock from Universal TV and UCP for this book. I don't know if it would be like a movie. I think it would probably have to be a movie. I don't think that this would be but it's interesting because she has, the sequel, then she's making a third one with Hendrix. So it's interesting, actually, to see maybe what they'll do with that. This article I saw was from like April of 2023, so I'm not really sure how much groundwork has been done or exactly what's going on, but there is talk of an adaptation.
Okay. So yeah, just the rights for now, but I agree it would definitely be like a very good rom-com as opposed to like a series.
Yeah. Of course, my Goodreads description, because the usual. Their love was supposed to last forever. But when life delivered blow after devastating blow, Yasmin and Josiah Wade found that love alone couldn't save or solve everything. It couldn't save their marriage. Yasmin wasn't prepared for how her life fell apart, but she is finally starting to find joy again. She and Josiah have found a new rhythm, co-parenting their 2 kids and running a thriving business together. Yet, like magnets, they are always drawn back to each other. And now they are beginning to wonder if they are truly ready to let go of everything they once had. Soon, one stolen kiss leads to another, and then more. It's hot. It's illicit. It's all good, until old wounds reopen. Is it too late for them to find forever? Or could they even be better the second time around? Award-winning and best-selling powerhouse author Kennedy Ryan is at her absolute best in this compelling, scorching novel about hope and healing and what it truly means to love for a lifetime.
Wow. That's it, man.
Mm-hmm.
This is a deep romance.
Yeah. And I wasn't expecting that.
No,
you
not
know?
at all.
And her writing is it has this really great mature tone about it, which this was my first Kennedy Ryan novel, which she's definitely an auto-buy for me now because the way that she writes is pretty much flawless. And I just didn't know what to expect going into this book, and I was not expecting what I read in a good way, not like a bad way. But I will say, I feel like the back of the novel threw me off for just reading like the summary of it, because I was expecting Yasmin and Josiah to like get together fairly soon in the book, and it wasn't until like 3/4 of the book that they like rekindled. And I was like, oh, like usually I feel like with these books it happens fairly quickly, and so this one she really does. She does a really good slow burn in this book.
And it wasn't like a stolen kiss. The stolen kiss, like you said, was 3/4 of the way in. But I wasn't like frustrated.
No,
you know
me
how
either.
usually you're just like, okay, let's get on with it. There was so much other stuff going on that I was like, the slow burn was working.
I agree 100%. So the novel starts with a before shot of what's called the beginning, and it's basically Josiah proposing to Yasmin, and then all of a sudden you're just thrown forward to the future, and now Josiah and Yasmin are divorced with 2 kids, a doting son, Kasim, who is adorable, and then you have the teenage daughter, Deja, who definitely butts heads with her mother. Deja, like, she's at that age where the 2 of them just are not friends, and she holds a lot of hostility towards her mom for the divorce of their parents. And even though they're divorced, they jointly own a restaurant that's called Grits, which I love that. That's actually a really good restaurant name. That's like a good brunch spot.
My mouth was salivating. I was like, I need to try these ribs. I need to try this food. Like, it sounds so good.
Yeah, and it's a very successful restaurant. So I think it's interesting that throughout the book, even after all they've been through, they can still be they're so good at co-parenting, and they're so good at still being like business partners, which is, I think, very rare. So it's interesting to see a book that really shines a light on not necessarily like the positivities of a divorce, but moving forward in a positive way instead of holding so much hostility and negativity and everything. Especially working in family law and seeing people who own businesses together and how it pans out, and it's nothing like this whatsoever.
And also, the restaurant business is not easy,
no,
especially in a bustling area like this. And they said, like, during COVID and during when she was kind of checked out, like, they had some really rough times. So the business hasn't always been good. Like, this is not an easy business to own in general. And then to have 2 divorced people making it work together, that's even crazier.
And now they're basically on a high with their business. So it's really kind of a testament to who they are as people already in the book. So there are tragic events that happened during their marriage that ultimately ended what I believe both people didn't expect to ever end. You kind of really get the vibe throughout this book that Yasmin was it for Josiah, and he wanted nobody else, and he had a hard time accepting the divorce. So there was the death of Bertie, who was Josiah's aunt, but also I think more of a mother figure because he lost his parents very young. And then there is the death of their son, Henry. A little bit of a trigger warning. There is talk of infant death and everything, so I just want to put that out there because I know that that can be hard for some people. So she does have a stillborn, and that is a lot for Yasmin to handle because they both happen kind of very close together. I don't know that they ever give an exact time range of when they were, but it's you appear that it happened like pretty much consecutively.
I think it was
fairly close.
Within a year.
Yeah.
I think that's the only like timeline they gave.
And Yasmin basically goes through, which who can blame her? She was also very close to Birdie, and she lost her son unexpectedly. So she just falls down a deep, deep well of depression, and she can't see through the fog. So their marriage ultimately ends because of those scenarios and the fact that Yasmin just can't see herself being happy. So now we're in the situation where Josiah is dating Yashti, who is the head chef of Grits. So now we're co-mingling some work and personal. I don't know where I'm going with that.
Work and pleasure, but
yeah,
not that much pleasure because they didn't fuck that much.
I know, but apparently Vashti's like this really, really good chef, and apparently she makes amazing ribs. They're brought up multiple times throughout this book. And Yasmin,
I just felt like that part, I was like, when they first introduced that he was starting a relationship with a chef, I was like, uh-oh, is this book going to be like cliches? And I thought it was going to kind of get corny because like he's smarter than that.
Yeah.
Than like mixing business, because they said we cannot afford to lose her. Like she's the best chef. We finally have everything working perfectly. He cannot fuck this up.
No, absolutely not. And it's been at the point in the book, it seems like it's probably 3 years or so into the divorce. So they've been separated for a good amount of time. And this is the first time that Josiah is actually dating somebody. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there's never really a time where Josiah comes out and says like, hey, I'm dating someone new. Yasmin can just kind of get the vibe when she sees them together at the restaurant. And then she ends up at some point seeing them together with her kids at her house, and she acts like she's okay with it. She does her best, but she's clearly not okay with it.
Okay, but that shit was weird. She should not have been okay with that. Like to walk into her house and see them all like playing a board game together. No.
Nope. That's gotta, that hurts. And the divorce, was her idea, obviously, but regret is such a huge theme in this book in like so many different ways. And this is like one of the biggest things of regret is that, Yasmin really didn't want to divorce Josiah, but she just was so deep in her grief that she couldn't see through anything. And so she had to end her relationship because she couldn't go on trying to save herself, save her kids, save her husband. So Josiah was kind of the kick to the side.
It was like the one thing in all of that grief that she could control because she knew she had to still show up for her kids. It was the one thing where she's like, this is something that I can't worry about. I can't focus on. And Josiah never thought that divorce was ever even an option. No. Like they agreed to be together forever. So he was just like, what? Like, okay, you're grieving, you're not dealing, but like, what the fuck are you talking about? We're not going to break up.
I know there's so many different little like Easter eggs throughout the book where, he bought her like a wheel necklace and he's like, till the wheels fall. It's very much like we're in this forever. There's no end in sight. But what I loved, and I'm so happy that Kennedy Ryan made a book for Soledad and she's doing one for Hendrix because I love these women. These women, oh my God, are so fucking fantastic. They crack me up anytime that there's a scene in the book with the three of them. I love it. They're my favorite parts.
I love them too. I feel like we didn't get enough of Soledad, but we will obviously in the second book. I'm so excited to
read the second book because I just want to see her kick her shitbag of a husband to the curb, and I hope I hope that the guy she ends up with is like a bad boy because I think she needs a bad boy.
And I also want to hear more about her daughters because they were so like rooting for their mom. Yeah. They seemed like they were such little badasses. I was like, we need more of this. But I agree. any time that those three friends were together, I loved it so much.
And it just cracked me up because they both were basically like, even though you're divorced, you should still definitely be banging your ex-husband. Like, how are you not still
They're
hitting
like,
that?
look how hot he
Like,
is.
do you see this Greek god in front of you? How are you not banging him?
I mean, yeah, he sounded really hot. So I agree.
Absolutely. So Deja really holds a lot of hostility towards her mom. And I think that this was one of the sadder things in the book, because you can definitely tell that, and it's brought up a few times, she basically blames her mom for breaking up their family, and she feels that she ruined Josiah's life. And so it's hard for Yasmin because she's put in so many different scenarios where she'll see Deja with Josiah, with Vashti, which that has to hurt, seeing her being like very cordial and happy with her. When she's with Hendrix, when she's with her friends, she has this happy demeanor. And then when it comes to Yasmin, she just shuts down and becomes very cold towards her mom. And Yasmin just doesn't know how to fix it. And it's hard. And she's a teenager, so she's at that age where it's just going to get worse. Unfortunately, we were daughters.
It's like
we know what
those
it's,
things together. Exactly. It's the age, but then it's also there. You can tell there's something deeper because Deja will make comments to Josiah like, why do you even talk to her? How can you defend her? How can you, like, she wants Josiah to hate Yasmin.
She does. And what's really admirable about Josiah is that he always does come to Yasmin's defense. And he does have a serious discussion with Deja about Henry, and, explains that losing their son just caused Yasmin to go into this deep depression. And she's made mistakes, and he doesn't really want Deja to hold that against her mom. But like you said, when you're a teenage girl and you got a grudge, that grudge stays for a very long time.
Oh, yeah. And the pettiness knows no bounds. But he also, like, he isn't trying to force Deja to have this relationship or have this fake relationship with Yasmin, but he does say, like, don't you dare talk about your mother like that.
Yeah.
Like, he defends her, but he doesn't try to force anything. He's just like, you can feel how you're going to feel, but you're not going to talk bad about her, and you're not going to cross a line.
Yeah. Which, again, I think is so admirable, because you don't see that in typical divorced families. It's very much the children coming home and saying all the bad shit that the other parent said about the other, whereas in the situation, it's just really, it's really refreshing to like read that.
Or even more than that, like dads not
also
wanting to get involved with their daughters and their mothers. You know what I mean? Like, that's their drama that they have to figure out, and kind of like staying out of it, where he's like, no, I'm going to make sure that this doesn't get out of hand.
And then we have Kasim, who is this sweet baby angel. I love him so much. And he's like,
so cute.
He's like this little smarty pants. And his teacher wants him to skip a grade. And like, that's just got to feel so good too for them as parents, because even going through all the turmoil that they've gone through, their son is still succeeding and excelling. So that in itself is amazing. But in order for him to be to find out if he is emotionally ready to skip a grade, because even though he may be there mentally or scholarly, like he could do it, they want to make sure that he can handle the fact that he's going to now be jumping a grade with a little bit of older kids, and he's afraid to leave his friend that's in his best friend that's in the grade and everything. So the teacher suggests that he speaks to a therapist. Now, therapy is a huge contention in this relationship. Yasmin is very much loves therapy, thinks it's great, wanted to go to therapy with Josiah during their marriage to do some marriage counseling, and Josiah was very, very against it, which I feel is very typical for men in general. But he definitely has a very negative thought of therapy, and he realistically wanted nothing to do with it. And then you have Yasmin, who over the past few years has really thrived with therapy. It's basically saved her life. So even though Josiah doesn't believe in it, he wants to help Kasim, and he makes a deal with him, and he's says, if you go to therapy, like, I'll do it. Which, again, just shows the amazing human that Josiah is. Because what dad would be like, listen, if you're going to go to therapy, like, I'll try it too. That just doesn't happen.
Yeah. And he, like, obviously doesn't think he's going to get anything from it because he
No,
doesn't
he
believe in it.
doesn't.
But he's like, if I need to go and talk to a stranger and pretend for an hour of, you know, however often, I'll do it for my son.
I know. And it's his first session with his therapist, like, cracked me up because his therapist could see through the bullshit. And he was like, yeah, like, you said that this was going to be, you know, one and done. So let's just talk about everything. You know, you don't believe in it. And Josiah was kind of like, all right, though. Like, all right, don't come at me. Like,
yeah. His therapist is a saint, obviously.
Yeah, basically. And during one of his sessions with his therapist, there's a flashback. There's a couple flashbacks throughout this book. Not a lot, but there's a few. And it's to the night of when Yasmin had asked for the divorce. So since losing Bertie and Henry, the dynamic of their relationship is Yasmin checks out from the business. She's basically not partaking in anything to do with the business. Josiah really picks up the slack and is taking it over. And that's also what feels to be his escape. So he's just there all the time. He's handling all the ins and outs. And Yasmin's just home taking care of the kids when she finds the strength to. Like, they're basically the only reason she's waking up is to get them ready for school and everything. So whenever Josiah comes home at night, he always finds Yasmin in the nursery for Henry. And this one night he comes home and he notices that she's in like a negligee, like a brand new lingerie set. And she tries to make a move on Josiah. And it's basically in hopes to just have another baby. And Josiah flies off the handle. Because he really wants to be intimate with his wife because he loves his wife so much. And there's this constant theme of Josiah wants his wife 24/7. Like, he'll see her and he's like, I need to like fuck you like right here, right now. I don't care that it's like the middle of the day. Like, he's so satiated for his wife. So the fact that when Yasmin finally seems to want to be intimate, it's not even because she truly wants it. It's more like a transaction. And he's very upset about this. And they are yelling at each other. And she basically asks for a divorce and is like, I like no longer like love you. I can't do this anymore. And
he's like in shock.
Yeah. Didn't see that coming whatsoever. And it's really sad.
That was hard to read. Yeah.
It was.
That was hard to read because you knew how both of them were struggling so much in their own ways and like processing it in their own ways. And like I said before, he truly just did not think that an option would ever be for them to not deal with things together. Like, he just thought, we're going to ride this out. We're going to get through it. But the fact that she even suggested it and then said, no, I'm sure this is what I want. He's in shock. Like, because he trusted her with his life. And now everything they know is just completely crumbled.
Yep. 100%. So we come to Thanksgiving, and I just got to say, I love Yasmin's mom. And she is sneaky little woman. Very, very sneaky. So Yasmin being Yasmin and she really is a very kind-hearted woman. She does like tell Josiah, like, you know, Vashti can come for Thanksgiving, which I think is very big of her to even, you know, allow that. And
I mean, this is a rhetorical offer, right?
Yeah,
like, this is not, you don't actually bring her.
No, I know. But, you know.
And he's like, oh, that's so nice of you. Sure, we'll be there. And I was like, no, she doesn't mean it. We don't want her here.
No. And it's funny because even like before this, there's definitely, they both have a little bit of jealousy about them dating other people. You know, and when she happened to go to Josiah's to get something for Kasim, and she finds Vashti there in just Josiah's white button down, and she's like, well, fuck. And then when Yasmin goes on a date with this white political guy, which that threw me. Was not expecting that at all.
Yeah.
That threw me. And
then they like bring up politics at dinner, and I was like, this is so awkward.
And then Josiah like watches them like kiss on the security camera outside the house. And they both are still very much in love with each other, but they're both being like, no, we're not. Like, everything's fine.
And they also have their imaginations running wild because Josiah sees them and he's like, oh, is this the first time they're kissing? Like, how often are they doing this? All this stuff. And Yasmin sees Vashti and she's like, oh, she must be sleeping over every night. Yeah. They must be fucking all the time, when really
it was like
that
was
the first time. Yeah.
Like, it was one time.
They don't know.
And Vashti like wanted to go like a million more times. And Josiah's like, no, I'm tired. I just want to go home. You know, he doesn't want to really be, he tries to be intimate with her. And which again is like a testament to him as a man, because I feel like once you're a free man, I feel like men go buck wild. And this guy just didn't sleep with anybody for years because he was still
maybe
so
if he didn't have to see his wife all the time, who he literally can't stop drooling over, it might have been easier for him. But I mean, he's comparing them every time he sees them.
I know.
That's not fair.
I know. So Thanksgiving is kind of one of I would say, the first turning point in truly seeing where the second chance romance is going to start happening. And Vashti can feel it. She can tell that like Josiah is still very much in love with his ex-wife. And Mama Carol, she basically says to Yasmin before the dinner, like, basically calls her a fool. She was like, what are you doing? Like, this was the best thing that ever happened to you. And she's like, if you have a chance to get it back, like, you need to take the chance. And the next morning, Yasmin and Josiah were going to Charlotte to potentially buy a second building to open up a second location for Grits, because that had been a dream of theirs prior to all the tragedy that they had dealt with. So now they're kind of in a place now to try it. And so when Josiah goes to pick up Yasmin and she's still upstairs getting ready, Mama Carol like sent him up there because she was too busy. He like walks into like Yasmin in just her bra. And I was like, you know, and she was being a little sneaky ma. She was trying to make it happen. She was not busy. She could have been helping Yasmin, but nope.
Because she, like everyone else, knows that this is going to happen. So let's just get a move on.
Yeah. And so they go to Charlotte and they meet Ken and Mary, who I feel like this is again like a little bit of a foreshadow, who are this couple who aren't actually married, but they've been together for so long. It's kind of like you and Eric. You know what I mean?
This couple spoke to me for that reason. It
really did. Like they've been together for years. They love each other so much. They just don't have
this business. They're like, why do we need the institution of marriage to tell us that we're in love? Like, why complicate things? Our love is holding us together, and that's all we need. And they have this successful business, this successful life. They're still, like, Yasmin comments on how they're still so obviously in love with each other. Like, they can't keep their hands off of each other. They're very caring. And it's just like, of course, like you said, foreshadowing. And it's also showing Josiah especially, although he doesn't say it, that there are alternatives to their love story. You know what I mean?
And when we get to the hotel room, there is only one bed. Only one bed. That's my favorite trope. Because there was a mix-up and they should have had their own hotel rooms.
Is this a popular trope?
Oh my god, girl. I have some book recommendations for you.
I mean, I saw right through it, but I didn't know that it was a common thing.
So when they get to the hotel, they were supposed to have separate rooms, but there's some like huge, what was it? Oh my god, it was some kind of like women's convention. Oh god, I wish I could remember what it was.
Yeah, it was some oddly specific women's convention.
So there was only one hotel room and everywhere else was booked up. And so they're finally like, whatever. And then they get into the room and there's only one bed. I love it so much. So their night there, they're in the hotel room. And this is the first time that you get the two of them have this truly emotional, vulnerable conversation with each other. And through this conversation is where the reader finds out what happened the night that Henry died. And so Yaz was working at Grits by herself. Josiah was at, I believe, a convention himself or some form of he was speaking somewhere and he really didn't want to go. He just had this like bad feeling about it. But Yasmin was like, I'll be fine. Like, I can do it. It's okay. And when she was at the restaurant, she actually ends up falling. And the way that she falls on her stomach, it impacted Henry and he was no longer getting any oxygen. So she delivered a stillborn at the hospital and Josiah, comes, and it's just like heartbreaking. There's like little nuances that Kennedy Ryan puts in the book where she brings up how Josiah says like he had my lips and like things like that. And it's just so I can't even imagine. I can't even like talk about it or think about it because I'm gonna get upset.
And
but
like, well, the layers are just so, because it's so obvious he blames himself for not being there, and she blames herself for not getting that floorboard fixed and not listening to him to not work late. And there are things that they're never gonna forgive themselves for, and they're never gonna stop blaming themselves for. And it's like, you can't even blame them. Like,
no.
Of course, she didn't think anything would go wrong. She'd had 2 healthy pregnancies. Everything was going great. And he just chalked his bad feelings up to, well, we recently lost a bird. Like, things just are crazy right now. Like, of course, they were making excuses. And then they could never see that something horrible like that was going to happen.
No. How can you?
You can't plan for something like that.
No. And, this conversation where they admit to themselves that they both basically blame themselves for the death of Henry, like you said, it somehow breaks this intimate barrier between the two of them, and it leads to like this night of desire. And Josiah says it can only happen one time, and I'm like, LOL, yeah, right. Okay, Josiah.
Okay,
you're gonna
Josiah.
get
sure.
the wife. You're gonna sleep with the woman that you literally cannot get enough of, and you think that one time is gonna be enough. All right. Okay. Whatever.
Wouldn't be enough for us. Let me tell you that.
I know. But then like this, in this conversation too, it's kind of therapy is talked about a little bit. And I feel like Josiah admits to himself and to Yasmin that he can see how therapy is helpful, and he's working through his own thing. And being that they're both in therapy, it's really changed the dynamic of their relationship now as well, especially who they are as people. This is really an outlet for Josiah to finally face some old traumas that he's never really tried to work through.
That he didn't even know
a lot of baggage to unpack. Yeah. And so the last, towards basically the last like quarter of the book is just so much. It's just really remarkable how she writes these characters and how much like you're rooting from them from the get anyways. But like I found myself like really rooting for Josiah throughout this book. Like he stuck out to me the most because it's especially him being a man a black man in therapy. Like, oh my, love it. Amazing.
I know. And also during this like intense, deep conversation that they have in Charlotte, this is the first time that Yasmin kind of insinuates that she was possibly suicidal if it weren't for her children. And Josiah is like shocked. Like he did not realize it was that bad because he couldn't fully comprehend. I mean, people who've never had depression can't comprehend depression. That's just the way it is. Like he couldn't fully comprehend how she could feel that badly. And she's like, the only reason I got out of bed was for my kids. And Josiah's like, well, what about me? But then I think he starts to understand that it has nothing to do with him. Like through that and through the therapy, he starts to realize like, oh, I wasn't a thought because she didn't have space in her mind for those thoughts.
The two of them do pick up this, sexual relationship that's going nowhere. And when one of us wants to end it, we'll end it and everything will be fine. No one will have any issues with it. Blah, 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 blah. So one of my favorite moments of this book, one of my favorite sexy, spicy moments was when all the girls were over for Deja's birthday party and these two just go into the garage to fuck. I'm like,
no, I was sweating. I was like, Deja's going to walk in. I did not like this. This was
that was my favorite.
Risky.
That was my favorite spicy scene of the book. I was like, hell yeah.
It was, if it wasn't Deja, I'm like, because Deja's going to walk in, everything's going to be ruined. It's going to break up their love story because they're not going to want Deja to get hurt.
But then
when he got out of there quickly, man.
But your fears did come true because eventually Deja does catch Yasmin and Josiah.
At least they weren't like
they weren't
mid-fuck in the car.
Like it was after the aftermath of
they were in a bed.
Yeah.
Which I feel like is better for her to find them in a bed as opposed to like the backseat of the SUV.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Deja finds out and she obviously has to try to decipher what the hell this means. And the three of them have this really honest, again, vulnerable, emotional conversation in the kitchen that is just the amazingness of what happens when you actually communicate your feelings. Wild what could happen. And she admits to her parents that the night that Yasmin and Josiah had that last fight, she heard Yasmin ask for the divorce. And so she blames everything on her mom for that specific reason because she feels like her mom broke up their family for no good reason.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to finally let this out and get this burden off of her, and for Yasmin to take that in, she's able to communicate to Deja what she was going through at that time and how she, Deja and Kasim were the only reason that she was even surviving, because otherwise if she
That's like such a big thing that you can tell she has processed through therapy is like being able to say, yes, I did something wrong. And she has this whole thing about like, just because you become a parent, you don't become perfect all of a sudden. Like there's actually more ways that you can fuck up and more ways that you can disappoint people. And it's just like the way that she can be so honest about it, even though Deja is young and moody and a teenager, like she can appreciate that her mom, who she wants to blame, is admitting that she did something wrong.
Yeah. And through having this conversation, the two of them are able to repair their relationship and reconcile. And obviously it takes time. It's not going to be perfect for them overnight, but there's little things that happen towards, throughout the end of the book where, Deja's like, oh, like I'll watch this show with you. Like we'll eat some popcorn together. Like, you know what I mean? Deja's finally coming around. Whereas before she literally wanted nothing to do with Yasmin unless it like served her in some way. And basically the way that the book, I really appreciate the way that the book ends because you're kind of, it really is a huge emotional tug of war for the both of them because Josiah is adamant that he can't be with Yasmin in an emotional way anymore because he lost, like you had brought up earlier, he completely lost his trust in her. Like how is he supposed to trust a woman that broke his heart and broke up his family? And how does he not know that she's going to do it again? And this is such a huge sticking point for him. And his therapist is very much like, well, is it worth the risk for you? Like, do you love this woman enough that you want to try to see if you can make it work? And whereas Yasmin's therapist tells her, like, you need to, like, tell Josiah how you feel. Like, you need to tell him that you made a mistake and that you want to reconcile, even though this wasn't supposed to be what was going to happen. Like, you want this. And so it's very much the two of them just kind of being back and forth with each other. And they again have some very heavy emotional, there were so many heavy emotional conversations in this book. I couldn't handle it. There was one after another.
I know.
And it's like, oh man, remind me real quick. But then
they're just followed by like intense fucking.
I know.
It all balances out.
A huge thing that happened in the book, and I'm hoping that you can recall because my brain is fried, but Josiah never cries in the book. Not when Birdie dies, not when they lose Henry, not when he divorces Yasmin. And then there's a point in the book where he finally lets go and cries. What was the catalyst that caused that?
That was last meeting with his therapist when his therapist had that conversation with him, like, is it going to be worth it? Do you want to fight?
That's what I thought. I didn't want to like mess it up if it was. But yeah, and so the fact that he finally got emotional for that, like that was such a huge moment in the book and for him because Josiah is clearly a very emotional person. It's obvious from the get, but he just doesn't have the ability to outwardly show his emotion. So the fact that at the end of the book, we get some tears from him, chef's kiss. Love it. Love everything about it. But they end up getting back together and everything's great. I know. Everything's great. Good second chance romance. And then there's an epilogue and he ends up proposing for them to get married again, which I was kind of shocked about. And we'll get to that. I have a discussion question about that because I don't know how I quite feel about that. But they end up back together and everyone's happy. And then they do want to have more kids together, but Josiah gets a vasectomy and they mainly are going to like adopt or foster. Like they still want to like grow the Wade family because they have so much these people have so much fucking love to give, and amazing.
I want them to adopt me.
Same.
Except I'd probably want to bang Josiah all the time, so that would be awkward.
It would be an inappropriate relationship.
I'd probably want to bang Hendrix too. I mean, love her.
Honest to God, she is so phenomenal. All right. So like this book is just very heavy. It's very heavy.
It's heavy.
But
it's heavy.
It's good. But there's so much to like really dissect and like talk about. And what was really cool was that actually, I don't know, I believe you got like the hard copy of the book, right? I had the Kindle, but there was actual like book discussion questions at the end of the book.
Oh, okay.
And I love that. I love when authors stick that in their book because I'm like, we have a podcast. This is great. This helps me think of questions to talk about.
And this would be an amazing book club book because of all of these very deep themes.
Yeah, so I pulled out a couple questions that I really liked and that I thought were good to kind of go into more. So the one was, there are details of the 2 catastrophic losses and then Yasmin's subsequent depression, which unfolds over the course of pretty much like the first few chapters of the book. So us as the reader, like what did you feel what emotions did you feel as it became clearer about what happened to Yasmin and how she ultimately responded?
I think at first it was confusing for me because it's like, oh, they've been divorced for 2-3 years, whatever. And now all of a sudden, all of these feelings are coming and they're still talking about those losses as if they just happened. So the more you read, the more you realize that the reason that it's been 2 years is because she's been working on herself for those years. She's been in therapy. She's been getting on the right medication and all of this stuff. And it's like, she finally, and she talks about this a lot, she finally feels like a whole person. She finally feels like she has friends who, there's this one part where I think it's where they're at the fireworks and she's like, I finally feel happy. Like when I was depressed, I was sad all the time. Because as someone who's, been through depression or has been through these types of things, like, that sometimes you're numb, you feel nothing. And then just being able to feel an emotion and her looking around and being like, holy shit, I'm finally able to feel my life again. Like that's incredible.
Yeah.
And she's still processing and she's still sad, but she's able to feel happiness at the same time.
I agree. And like you said, I could see why it's confusing as well, because the details of what happened with these tragedies, it's so touched on very little, and then throughout the book you get all the what really happened. And so it's really interesting as you read, and then you get to the part of what happened to Birdie and you can reflect back on her reaction, and when you find out what happened with Henry and you reflect back, and it's like, how can she not have been in that position? I don't blame her. She lost an amazing woman in her life, and then she unexpectedly lost her son, who didn't even get a chance at life, who wasn't even, he was a full baby. Like, it wasn't like he was a small fetus, a few months old. Not that it makes it any easier. Like, she gave birth to an actual baby that wasn't breathing. Like, that's not, that's so hard. And
that's horrible.
So her not being able to feel like she can go on
for that.
No. Oh my God, you absolutely cannot blame her. And I think that the way that Kennedy Ryan portrayed this was so fucking well done, and it was so relatable. Even if you didn't go through anything as tragic as that, just her whole stance on depression and mental health, it was so fucking good. Like, it was just so well written.
And the fact that, like, Yasmin found what worked for her, which was, therapy and self-care and all of these things, and she was so passionate about it and would stand behind it and say, like, she believed in this wholeheartedly. She was not embarrassed about it. She she owned up to it all the time, and she still was the same person. She was stronger, she had a lot more scars, but she was still a great mom. She was still co-parenting. She was still working at the restaurant. Like she was still that same person, but in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And then this kind of like plays into like the next question that I found, which was that therapy plays a really huge role in the book. And there's a lot of discussion about grief and depression, and that in some circles, therapy is still stigmatized. And so one of the questions is, how did therapy and perceptions about therapy impact the characters and the story, which I think we talked about that with Josiah, how his perception of therapy was so negative. And then once he finally got in the thick of it, it made him a better person too, because he was able to fully become in tune with himself and his feelings and emotions, which in turn makes the story even better, because now these two people are coming back together a second time as better human beings, if that makes sense.
And even further than that, it was literally the breaking point for their marriage. The fact that he would not go to therapy with Yasmin. And she says, like, maybe if he had, we would have been able to get through it. And obviously, I don't think so. I think that he had to go on his own and process all these things. But the fact that he would do anything for her except go to therapy. And then he finally does. And then he looks like a big dum-dum because it ends up working for him. It ends up showing him things that he didn't even know he needed to process. Like he didn't realize that he never processed his parents' death from when he was like 8 years old or something. Like he was like, oh, that happened so long ago. Why would I have to think about that now? Why would I have to, how could that still be affecting me?
Yeah.
And we talked about it a little bit, but like men in therapy, and especially Black men in therapy, this is something that's frowned upon in society. It's something that, it's hard for men to talk about their feelings. It's hard for men to admit that they need help, admit that they could benefit from talking to someone. And just the way that they showed his transformation and his acceptance of it, it wasn't corny. It wasn't cheesy. It was like, it was so believable. It was so like, if you find the right person and they get you to talk, it works. You know what I mean?
I think that she did such a great representation of what therapy could actually be like, especially when you find the right therapist for you, because it's game changing. It is such a game changer when you can find that therapist that you can truly open up to, because I've had therapy where it was very surface level and I felt like I was getting nothing out of it. And then I found a therapist that pulled shit out of me that I didn't even know that I had issues with. You know what I mean? So it's once you find that therapist, it is truly life changing.
And someone to call you on your shit, which both of their therapists did in different ways. I loved when Yasmin's therapist was like, okay, so let me get out my calendar. And you're going to tell me a date where you're going to stop fucking around and you're going to move on with your life. And I just love that she was like, nope, we're going to put this down in writing. And Yasmin was like, wait, what? What do you mean? And she's like, no. Like, you're going to decide right now when you're going to decide to start living your life.
I also love Josiah's therapist feelings wheel. I was like clapping because you also
like,
have
I don't need to look at the feelings wheel.
Because then you have like this Black therapist who is like so in tune with like, trying to get Black men to like fucking open up. And he's like, here's the feelings wheel. What feelings on this wheel are you feeling right now about this situation? And then Josiah like brings it up, and like when he's by himself, he's like, the fucking feeling wheel, like
yep.
coming back.
And he says something, and his therapist is like, that isn't a feeling. Look at the feelings wheel.
I know. I'm like, amazing. I love everything about it.
I loved it.
Me too. So food is so critical to the story in so many like ways. So, discussing the ways beyond the fact that they own a restaurant, that food is significant. And one of the biggest things is Yasmin finding Birdie's handwritten recipes and her recreating these dishes that were made with so much love for them. And now Yasmin is kind of taking the torch and she's trying to make those recipes for her family. And it's so relatable. I have when my grandma passed away, by Christmas, she would make all the Christmas cookies. Like she would literally make a huge ass platter of 10 to 20 different Christmas cookies. And she would make them for every family. So she was making like 10, 15 trays of cookies. And when my grandma passed, my aunt was able to get those recipes, and she actually like made me a little cookbook of it. She made one for my cousin. That was like our wedding gifts. So now like I can continue the trend of making these cookies at Christmas time whenever I want them for like my family. So it's like food is such a fucking love language in so many different ways. And the way that it was portrayed in this book was like spot on.
I completely agree. And it was separate from the restaurant. Because it was always like, oh, Yasmin can't cook.
I know.
And then
but then when she was making like Birdie's recipes, like she was successful. And I'm
yes, and then she makes the cake for Deja's birthday.
Oh, and when Deja
and
like
Deja's
compliments
like, what do you
her.
mean? And then she tastes it and she's like, oh my God. And yeah, she says, thank you.
Yeah.
And like that literally rips Yasmin in two. And then 10 minutes later, she's banging Josiah in the car, which was a little irresponsible. You just got your first thank you from your daughter in like 5 years.
I know.
Probably should have thought about never mind. It's not the point. Also, a lemon pound cake. That's our favorite cake. Come on.
I mean, all right. I do love 11-pound cake though. I get it from.
Yeah, but Josiah said the chocolate cake was better. He said it.
Yeah, this is true. All right. So, did you understand Yasmin and Josiah's rationale for keeping their affair a secret at first? And did you agree with their reasons?
Yes, because obviously Deja's issues with it. And because they found out that Kasim had issues with it too, and had issues with loss and processing.
People dying.
Yeah, and like thinking that his dad wasn't going to be there. So I think they definitely needed to wait to make sure this was going to be a real thing. I think they probably should have been a little bit more careful about it because they were banging like teenagers, but they hid it for as long as they could.
Yeah, and I think it's smart, like you said, especially when there's children involved. You know, you don't want to keep breaking your children's heart if you're going to get back together and then end up breaking up just to get back together again, just to keep breaking up. Like that's the emotional toll that that's going to take on the children, on their relationships with themselves as well as with their parents.
Too.
Exactly. That's when you're the most, you know, everything is more heightened at those ages. Especially as you're growing into like your adolescent years. So I do understand as well why they kind of had to keep it a secret. And I felt like they also kept it a secret because they didn't know where it was going to go. They didn't know if it was just going to be like a one-time thing and we're just banging it out and hopefully it'll bang it out of our systems, which LOL again. No,
yeah,
of course
well,
not.
yeah, because even though they're having all these like open, vulnerable conversations, they weren't having those conversations because neither of them wanted to hear the answer. Like when they asked Yasmin, her friends asked her like, well, is he sleeping with someone else? And she's like, I don't think so. And then she's like, oh, wait, I should probably ask that. And then in the back of his head, he's like, oh, well, I can't trust her, so we can't be in a relationship. So it took a while for them to actually talk about those things because they were scared of what the answer was going to be.
Exactly. And so this leads into my next question, which is, were Josiah's initial fear and skepticism when Yasmin asked him to come home justified? And like, how did they make you feel? And it was like, as we discussed, like the trust was the biggest sticking point for Josiah. And so when Yasmin asks him to come home, like, of course he's going to fly off the handle at first because he's like, why did you break us up in the first place? Like, how dare you kind of ask me to come back when, you know, you were the one who kicked me out of this home?
Yeah, I totally understood why he felt like that especially because she had gone through this transformation and because she was, you know, working on herself. And it's like, okay, is this just a part of her therapy? Is this just a part of, you know, is this just a season of her life? But then at the end, when, you know, he talks to his therapist about it and it's like, is it worth it? It really brings up that question of like, is it worth it that, yeah, you may get your heart broken again, you may have to go through this again and your entire life might get shattered again? Or are you going to live your entire life in regret? And he said something like, I measure how much I love people by how scared I am to lose them.
Yeah.
And that's something you don't think about, but that's so real. Like, you can't always be worried about, oh, well, what's going to happen if they leave? Because how can you be present?
Yeah. So, and also, like, him getting so the way that he keeps going back and forth is I think understandable, but also like me as the reader, I'm like, I know they're gonna get back together. Like, duh. Why else am I reading this book? But in those moments, I'm like, come on, Josiah, just like fucking just do it. Like, just see through, like, she loves you so much, but you have to kind of put yourself in their shoes. And how would you feel, you know, if that would happen to you? So it's like, oh, okay. Like, I mean, I get it. Your feelings are valid, but come on.
And she also was like, well, this is proof that I never stopped loving you because I kept your shoes.
Oh my God.
What was the shoe thing? I hated that.
Yeah.
I was like, it's proof because the shoes, it was giving me like Sex and the City vibes where like they go back to get the shoes and Carrie and Big get back together. I was like, I don't like that.
All right, so my final question. There's some debate about what makes a romance novel and how it should end. If Yasmin and Josiah had decided not to remarry, but took a page from Ken and Mary's book, would you consider it a happily ever after? Did you agree with their decision? I was actually a little bummed that they were going to get remarried. It was ironic because as I was reading the book and I was comparing them, especially at the end, to Ken and Mary, and I was like, oh, they're going to have, because I would consider it a happily ever after if they didn't remarry, because it's a second chance romance and they have a family. They know what they have is real. They don't need to, you know, go through the whole process again. It doesn't make their love any less or any more. So I was actually a little bummed that he ended up proposing and they were going to get married again.
I agree with you. Yeah. Because what was the point of Ken and Mary? I mean, I know it was just showing a different type of love story. I get why the author did it because that was like the final nail in the coffin. Like Josiah fully trusts her again. He's ready to commit again. But I agree. I think that the happy ending would have been fulfilled with him just coming home. They didn't have to remarry. I mean, it helped that it was like a little bit of time in between, so they didn't rush into anything. But I agree. It was I was surprised by it.
Yeah, because especially when I read this discussion question, and like I said before, like I brought up, I'm like, your relationship, like marriage is probably not in the cards for you guys, but that doesn't make your love any less. It doesn't mean that you and Eric aren't going to have a happily ever after with your dogs. You know what I mean? Like marriage doesn't make your relationship any better than anyone else's.
Like, and it's such like a stigma in society that like if you've been together for a certain amount of time, you have to get married, or that it's not, you know, a legitimate relationship unless you get married. And I understand that it's different when you have children because, you know, then it can get a little different.
It can muddy the waters in a sense, but
exactly. And like sometimes that is an extra layer that's kind of, you know, feels more necessary when you add children into the mix. But putting a label on things can complicate it and can add this pressure that isn't necessary. And especially when you haven't seen successful marriages or you haven't seen, you know, successful relationships growing up, it's like if everything is going just the way you want it to go, why risk messing it up?
100%.
So yeah, I thought it would have been a unique end if they didn't get married, and instead it kind of got a little cookie cutter.
I agree. 1,000% agree with that. So that was Before I Let Go by Kennedy Ryan, and it ripped my soul out multiple times. Before I get to the ratings, was there anything else you wanted to discuss?
I don't think so.
Okay. I feel like we hit everything in the best ways that we could.
Yes. Like, there was we could have talked for 5 hours about this book because it was a heavy one.
I was like, I'm not even going to do a huge outline because I'm going to get into it and I don't have the time for that. I have to go to sleep soon. Like, I can't get into it. All right. Are you ready for my rating system?
Oh, yes. What's it going to be?
All right.
Okay, go ahead.
I would like to know how many Vashti's ribs you gave this book.
Not bringing Vashti into this. She got out safely, unscathed.
Not partially. Her ribs, though.
Damn, I wanted those ribs so bad. And that corn pudding that she was talking about.
Oh, don't even talk about it.
Thanksgiving.
No, I can't. I can't talk about corn. You know how I feel about corn. I can't get into it.
Did the Kindle version have recipes in the back?
I did not check, so I don't know.
The paperback has like 3 recipes in the back, and the corn pudding is one of them, and I might be making it.
I need you to take a photo of that immediately and send that to me, because
Yeah.
corn. I'm like the little boy when that was a viral video of the boy with the corn. Corn!
I forgot about
Literally me.
Wow.
Anyways.
That's funny. Okay, sorry. So Vashti's ribs. Okay. I was really between a 4.5 and a 5. And this is crazy for me. This is a romance. You know, I'm not a romance girly.
Mm-hmm.
But I just didn't really care about the love story as much as I did the growth of the characters, the friendships, the self-reflection. The writing was absolutely incredible. Like, it reads heavy, like a self-help book. Like, there were some parts that were just these deep insights that are casually thrown in that I had to reread just to absorb them, because I'm like, holy shit, that's deep. I gotta reread that. I know I'm missing something. So even though I had a couple issues, I think I'm gonna stick with my 5 ribs, because as soon as I finished, I was just like, wow, that writing was amazing. Like, it wasn't, I feel like romance books can sometimes get a little cookie cutter or, you know, corny in some aspects, but this was just so developed, and it had so much of this like social commentary, and especially us as proponents of therapy. I thought it hit. I loved it. I'm ready for the next one.
100%. Am I ready for the next one? I agree with everything you said. I did, however, give this 4.5 out of 5 Vashti's ribs. There were just a few sticking points for me. Apparently sticking points, again, is like my favorite phrase tonight. I've said it like 100 times, so apologies.
It's because we're talking about sticky ribs.
Oh, boom.
Yikes.
I was upset about the whole like Deja character, just the way that she was treating her mom, because I'm like, am I just like taking this in because now I'm a mom and I don't want to deal with this shit when Millie's a teenager? But it was just, a little bit of it was a little unrealistic for me, just in the sense of like the parenting, but it was very tiny, and I was upset with the ending. I wish that they didn't get remarried, or there wasn't a proposal. But all in all, literally one of the most mature romances I've read in a very long time. As soon as I started it, I like remember telling you I was so amazed with how mature the writing is, because I feel like when you go into a romance novel, you don't expect what you read when you read this book, with the heaviness and the way that she intertwines so much more than just the romance into the book. And it's not cheesy, it's not predictable, it's not what I'm used to, and I was very surprised and happy with it. And the way that she addresses depression and mental health, there were a million quotes in this book that I just wanted to like highlight and like talk about, because there was just so many. But
so many revelations.
So I want to end with one of my favorite quotes in the book, because it was one of 100, because they were so good. But I thought this one was it explains the book in like the best way possible. And this was during one of Yasmin's conversations with her therapist. So this is her therapist speaking this to Yasmin. So she says, "You can't change what has already happened, what you did or decided. So you have 2 choices. Wallow in it, stay in the chokehold of guilt and shame that holds you back from the next phase of your life, or decide you've punished yourself long enough for things you can never change, and set a date when you forgive yourself and move forward." And that just hit so hard when I read that, because it's so true. I feel like suffering with depression, you find yourself just wallowing in the negatives, and it brings you down so hard. And she has a point, like, you can just stay in this chokehold and go through the cycles every day, or you can get up and push through in the best way that you can. So I thought that was just a really beautiful concept.
And I think it speaks to anyone too. Like, it's this whole concept of you choose when you want to be happy. Like, yes, that's a simple way of saying it, but you can either keep punishing yourself and keep blaming yourself or reflecting or not growing, or you can decide that you want to take those steps forward.
Yeah. So if
I
anyone
love
on here
that.
listening is suffering with depression, therapy is literally fucking amazing. And I implore you to just give it a shot. Even if you've tried and failed, I implore you to try again, because your therapist just might not have been the right fit for you. Because it's...
And not for nothing, even if you're not depressed, sometimes you need therapy to deal with the people in your life who are depressed.
I agree. I agree. Anyways, that's all we have for you today. If you like what you heard on this heavy fucking episode, please make sure to follow, subscribe, and rate and review the podcast on whatever platform. If you have any book recommendations or questions for us, you can email us at fullybookedcalfpod@gmail.com, and also be sure to follow us on TikTok and Instagram at fullybookedcalfpod to see our upcoming reads. Thanks for checking us out, and remember,
if you need us, we're fully booked.
Bye.